Stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. Our slogan has changed again, hasn't it? A simple message, though, that slogan hasn't really gone away for most of us over the course of the last 9 months. It's a message that is clear and should be easy to follow. Find your front door, step behind it, and only leave if you have to. Life is fragile. Protect it. But what makes the place behind our front door home? What makes home home? We can step inside our front doors, close our doors, only leave if we have to, yet not feel at home. In this strange space that we occupy now, fearful of this virus that is going rampant in our community and awaiting the normality promised, home might be difficult to find. Home should be a place where we feel comfortable and we feel safe. And it might not feel quite like that right now. Particularly if your home is full of activity because you're working from home. School is at home, life is at home. It might not feel like home because the buzz of family isn't around. Staying at home, as the slogan asks us to, isn't the easiest of things right now. Because we have to do it. And it's hard. If you really thought about home and that word, where would you describe as home? If you were going home, where would you be going? Say you were out, imagine going out, and you were just standing there in the middle of nowhere and someone said, "Where is home?" What would you say? Is it the place that you live now? Is it the place that you were born? Is it a place you've never lived but where you feel your roots lie? When I go to see my parents, I'm often told I'm going home, but I've never lived there. I'm very comfortable there, but it's not home. For me, New Addington actually isn't really home. I'm always pulled north. I'm not sure where to, but I'm pulled north. But my home, where I live, is here. Perhaps home is amongst those we feel most comfortable with rather than a place. Maybe home is a moment where we feel far more settled than we do now. The next 3 weeks we're going to look at 3 Psalms, Psalm 90, 91 and 92. And we begin with Psalm 90, thinking about where we find home. Now we're looking at these 3 Psalms because we decided as a leadership team that we were going to have a Psalm of the year this year. Psalm 91 is going to be our Psalm of the year, as well as a verse of the year, which is taken from Psalm 91 and I'll introduce next week as part of our covenant service. Psalm 90, 91 and 92 sit together quite nicely. They take us on a journey inspired by past experience and story to finding a refuge in the present, to finding our future with God. And it begins with Psalm 90, which describes itself as a prayer of Moses. It's a psalm of lament, of crying out to God from a difficult place and asking for help to get through it. It might be that that's where our prayers are now. When we think about home, Moses would not be a man who we would ever think to be able to describe as someone having an earthly home. He grew up in the palaces in Egypt but never fitted in. He was an Israelite. He ran to find a place of safety after killing a man, but was called back. He led the Israelites out of Egypt but never made it to the promised land. In his nomadic existence, he was not able to find an earthly home. But he did find home. It says so at the beginning of the psalm. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations, before the mountains were born or brought from the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. And in times of crisis, the community of Israel would gather at the sacred place. They would articulate their crisis in prayer and they would pray for God's intervention. And the psalm starts from this place. Staying at home has a physical meaning, but as people of faith in the midst of crisis, it also has a spiritual meaning. For the Israelites and for us, as we listen to the stories of our ancestors, we recall our own stories and we remember that the place where we're going to find our deepest security is not a physical place, but it is God. It's that sacred place with God, wherever that sacred place is. He is our constant, as he was Moses' constant. He has been the place of safety for our ancestors in the faith. He has been the place of safety before the world was even created, before there were mountains, before there was a New Wellington. He is the place of safety now. The call to stay at home, I'd like to extend a little, well maybe a lot, and say it is a call to return to God. We wouldn't be here without him, and he gives us shelter now. As we face the coming months, first, look up. Remember that from last week? Find your dwelling place in him. In the chaos, he is constant. Stay home. Stay home in God. He is our dwelling place. In the Psalm of Lament of Psalm 90, staying home in God doesn't mean the Israelites were sheltered from the pain of what was going on in the world. Just in the same way, staying home for us, we're not going to be sheltered from the pain of what is going on in the world. And some of us won't be able to stay home at all, and we'll see it firsthand. The psalmist goes on to reflect then on the fragility of human life. Where God is eternal, a human being is only on earth for a moment in time. Where God is 1,000 years, a human being only lasts a day. I think we have all very much more begun to recognise the fragility of human life over the past year, whatever we have seen in the past. In a normal year, we experience death, we mourn, we express our great sadness at the loss, it hurts, but in many ways we recognise it as part of the normal walk of life. It's hard to deal with, but we have things in process to help us deal with that. But now, it all seems so much more close to home. If we've got through the last year without knowing someone personally that has died of COVID, we're probably now in the minority. The fact that our NHS is overwhelmed at the moment shows that. And as we endeavour to protect the NHS, we are expressing our understanding of the fragility of human life right now. As we choose to stay away from family and friends, and we choose to close our buildings for worship, we understand that life matters. It is fragile, and we need to endeavour to behave in a way that it means it will continue. When humanity was created, as described in Genesis, as humanity being created in the image of God, each person, although existing for just a day, matters. You matter. Your life matters. The person lying in ICU at Mayday Hospital with COVID, their life matters, and that's why they're doing as much as they can to save them. When we recognise the fragility of life, we recognise so much more our need for God. The psalmist in their lament calls out to God. The psalmist doesn't understand how God could have let this happen to them and why he doesn't intervene. We might be praying prayers like that at the moment. But the fragility of life expressed in the psalm can also be seen as a reflection on human choices, human sin, and our turning away from God. The further away we turn from God's ways, the more fragile life becomes. We've seen that in the inequalities that exist in our COVID-19 statistics, where most recently there has been a report that those who live in poverty are more likely to lose their lives to the virus. This has happened and is a sign that we don't value everyone equal. There have been other similar statistics, similar reports done on when it comes to the BAME community and those with mental health issues, that they're more likely to suffer from the virus because of the inequalities that exist in our society. And it is wrong. It is not God's way. Each person is made in the image of God, and each person has value and should have the same protection from this virus. The call to protect the NHS and help them save lives is also a call for us to learn to value life, our own lives and the lives of others. It's a call for us to lift up those who have been marginalised. And as the vaccine is rolled out, it's only right that the people who are getting it first, the elderly and the most vulnerable, because their lives matter just as much as everybody else's. So we seek to preserve them. The value of the NHS is in its indiscriminate way of caring for all, whatever background, however much money they have, because each life matters. In the Psalm, verse 12 says this: "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." As we understand how fragile life is and how much it matters, it changes the way we live. Right now, it is meaning going against all our instincts in how we live. But this is helping us recognise and value much more the life that we have when there is no pandemic. As we lose life, we endeavour to gain life, and we can choose to live more wisely in the days ahead. When Jesus told the woman caught in adultery to go and sin no more, he was teaching her to use the crisis experience when her life was threatened by stoning to learn to live life in a better way, by turning to God, not turning away from him, by finding home and security in him. As we live through this time of crisis, and as we learn something of the fragility of life, our call is to learn to live life in a better way, to turn away from sin, to turn towards God and find the wise way to live in him. We find our way home to God as we recognise how much we need him. Protect the NHS, recognise how fragile life is. And as we recognise the fragility of life and how short it is, we recognise the value of life. We begin to want it to matter. We want to have purpose. We want it to be significant. Saving lives is more than just saving lives. It's making life possible and worth living. In Psalm 90, the psalmist, after reflecting on the fragility of life, turns back to asking God to help him get through this time. He looks ahead to a time where he will be filled with joy and with happiness, where the evidence of God at work in the world will be so overwhelming that all will see it. And so he closes the psalm by saying, "May the favour of the Lord God rest on us, establish the work of our hands for us." Yes, establish the work of our hands. The psalmist recognises their complete dependence on God for what comes next. As we continue to walk with the threat of the virus, we keep coming back time and time again to God. He is the one who will get us through. He is the one that will keep us safe. He is the one that will lead us on. He is our dwelling place. He is our home. One of the side effects of the pandemic is that it's taken away our corporate creativity. We're not able to do and be all of the things that involve other people, and that has taken away some of life. For some people, their mental health has suffered enormously. For some, their emotional well-being. For some, not moving from the house has meant that walking beyond the garden wall seems daunting and impossible right now. We've not been able to keep connections with friends and family in the same way. Life has got smaller as things have been stripped away. How can we use what we've learnt now to help to make others' lives better in the future? What can we do to bring life amongst the side effects of the pandemic? What might this crisis teach us about what matters? As we look ahead with hope, the things we most value are those we're looking forward to, working towards. We might pray the same prayer as the psalmist, that as God's favour rests upon us, he will establish the things we put our hands, hearts and minds to. So far beyond where we are now, our lives and the lives of those around us will get better, and that work begins now. As we look ahead with hope and recognise our own lacking without God, we might want to begin to think about how we share the life that Jesus gives us with others. How can we be the hands and feet and voice of Jesus in the neighbourhood? He is the one that saves lives. If we want to make a difference that endures in a way that is established, then we need to perform the work of our hands in a way that directs people to Jesus and the life that he brings. And that work in helping people see the home that they will find in him begins now. Save lives. Ask God to establish the work of your hands. Find your home in God. Recognise the fragility of life. And because each person matters, ask God to help you bring life to others as you share in the way you live and talk how you have found your home in him. Amen.